There is a specific kind of person who doesn't try to be interesting and somehow becomes the only person in the room that other people cannot stop thinking about. They're not louder, they're not performing. If anything, they're quieter, more contained, and the people around them can feel something they can't name, can't access, can't complete. And that incompleteness is the whole mechanism. The brain fixates on what it cannot fully resolve. Psychologists call this the Zeigarnik effect, the mind's tendency to return compulsively to open loops, to unfinished things, to anything it started but couldn't close. And someone who cannot be completely read, who has depth you can sense but not access, becomes a loop the mind cannot stop trying to close. That is not infatuation. That is psychology. And after 15 years of sitting across from people who carry this quality and never understood why it worked the way it did, I want to tell you something. The card that describes you most precisely is not the Hermit. Though the solitude is there, it is the High Priestess. And what she is actually pointing at is nothing short of the architecture of your interior life. The reason this matters is that most people who carry this quality have been told in one way or another that there is something wrong with it, that they're too closed off, too hard to reach, that they should open up more, give more, let people in more quickly, be more legible. What they were never told is that what reads as withholding from the outside is, from the inside, something completely different. And that difference is where your power actually lives. The High Priestess is not a feeling. She is a knowing. The distinction is this: a feeling passes through, changes, rises, and falls. A knowing is structural. It lives below the level of words. It arrived complete before your mind caught up to it. When she appears in a reading, she is not telling you to look harder at the outside world. She is pointing to the interior world that already exists, the one you've been building, perhaps your whole life, often without anyone around you knowing it was happening. In 15 years of reading, what I've found is that the people who pull this card most consistently are the ones who did most of their growing up inside themselves. Not necessarily in isolation, though sometimes that, but inside, in the private architecture of their own experience, their own processing, their own understanding. The world became a place they observed with great precision and moved through with great care, and that care became a kind of containment that other people feel immediately. What the High Priestess is actually showing in a reading is this: there is something in you that cannot be extracted, cannot be summarized, cannot be handed over in a conversation. And that very inextractability is the thing that creates the loop in other people's minds. They sense it, they try to reach it, they can't, and the brain, being what it is, cannot let that go. What comes next is what most people completely misunderstand about the loner, and it changes everything. The thing nobody actually says about the person who carries this quality is that their apparent distance is not distance at all. From the inside, it doesn't feel like withdrawal. It feels like being full. Like the interior world is already so richly occupied that the external world does not create an urgency. You're not avoiding people. You're not closed. You're simply not empty enough to need filling from the outside in the way other people do. And that distinction is everything. What this looks like from the outside is someone who doesn't chase, doesn't perform, doesn't need the conversation to go a particular way. And in a world where most people are running open loops of need, wanting to be seen, wanting to be chosen, wanting to be confirmed, the person who is not doing that becomes, by contrast, extraordinary. Not because they're trying to be, because they're genuinely not running the same program. In 15 years of reading, the card I reach for when I'm sitting with someone who has this quality is always the same. It's the Four of Cups. And the way most readers explain it, as someone disconnected, checked out, unavailable, misses the entire mechanism. The Four of Cups is not the card of someone who has nothing to offer. It is the card of someone so internally occupied that they are genuinely not scanning the horizon for what's next. They're inside something. And the person who is inside something has a quality of presence, of solidity, that the person running on hunger simply cannot replicate. If this is resonating for you, subscribe. There is more where this comes from. This channel is built for exactly who you are. And if this landed, the like tells me to keep going deeper. The cost of this, and I want to be honest about what I think this means, is real. It is not a flaw that needs correcting, but it is real. The person who is built this way often goes long stretches without being known in the way they are capable of being known. Because the people they encounter sense the depth but cannot access it, and many of them stop trying. Not everyone will come back a third time, a fourth time, a fifth time. And the loner, who has learned to be self-sufficient in precisely this way, often won't notice when they leave, until much later, until the quiet becomes something heavier. That heaviness is worth naming. Because the Six of Cups can also appear for people with this quality. The card of longing for something that was real, something that mattered, something that didn't get enough time or enough space before it ended. What the High Priestess builds is extraordinary. What the Six of Cups sometimes holds is the grief of all the things that couldn't quite stay long enough to receive it. The re-engagement question, the one that changes how you understand all of this, is not, how do I become more available? The question is, what is actually happening inside you when you are most fully yourself, and why that specific interior state creates the exterior phenomenon you've been living your whole life. That is what the next part of this is actually about. Let me tell you what I've come to understand after thousands of readings. The loner is not a person who is missing something. The loner is a person who has developed an interior life of such genuine richness that being in their own company is not a last resort. It is a preference. And that preference communicates itself, not as arrogance, not as indifference, but as a specific quality of not needing. And not needing in a world full of needing is the rarest signal of all. The Zeigarnik loop I named at the beginning of this, the brain's inability to release what it cannot complete, is only activated by something that resists completion. And resistance, in this context, doesn't mean coldness. It doesn't mean you're not warm, not genuine, not present. It means that there is something in you that cannot be fully arrived at, even by you, even after all this time. The depth is real. It's not a performance of depth. It is the actual thing. And actual depth has a specific gravity that performed depth never achieves. What comes through in this energy again and again is the Ace of Swords, not as aggression, but as a quality of a mind that sees with particular clarity. The loner who built their life inside themselves developed in that interior space a precision of perception that becomes visible the moment they speak. They don't say much. When they do, it lands differently. And the mind of the person they're speaking to notes that difference immediately and begins returning to it. That is the loop activating. That is the obsession beginning, and it has almost nothing to do with what was said and almost everything to do with the quality of presence behind it. The shadow of this is worth looking at directly. The loner who has never been told that their self-containment is a structural quality rather than a social failure sometimes develops a specific kind of armor around it. They preemptively withdraw before they can be left. They become expert at reading the moment a connection will require more vulnerability than they have been told they are allowed to offer. And they exit quietly, elegantly, in a way that looks like self-sufficiency, but is actually the wound that developed around the quality, not the quality itself. The devil is in that armor, if I'm being precise about the card, not in the depth, in the protection built around it after the depth was called too much. Now here is what actually changes when you understand this fully, and it is the piece most people never get to. The Four of Cups is the card I want to spend real time with here, because it holds the complete picture. Picture the figure sitting, arms crossed, eyes slightly closed, 3 cups on the ground before them. A 4th cup appearing from above, offered, and the figure not reaching for it. This card has been read as apathy for centuries. What I read in it after 15 years is something completely different. A person so deeply inside their own experience that the external offer is simply not registering as urgent. That is not pathology. That is a specific kind of fullness. And it becomes pathology only when it becomes unconscious, when the person is no longer choosing their interior focus, but is simply defaulting to it as a way of not risking contact. The distinction between those two states is everything. Conscious interiority is power. Unconscious avoidance is the same quality become cage. What I've seen consistently in readings for people with this quality is a cups heavy chart. 5 of cups in the past position, 4 of cups in the present, the Ace of Cups somewhere in the future. The 5 of Cups holds the losses, the connections that didn't survive the depth, the grief of the interior person for the things that couldn't quite hold them. The 4 holds where they are now, inside, occupied, present to themselves. And the Ace of Cups in the future position is almost always pointing at the same thing. Not that love is coming as an event, but that the capacity that built itself in all that solitude is ready to actually be used. Not performed, used. Subscribe if you want to keep going deeper. This channel is built for exactly who you are, and if this helped, the like tells me to keep coming. The loner who has never received this information often makes one of two errors. The first is to assume the magnetism they create in others is a problem, a misreading, something that will correct itself when people see who they really are. The second is to exploit it without understanding it, using the unavailability as a strategy rather than inhabiting the depth that creates it. Both of these miss the actual truth, which is that the quality is neither a mistake nor a tool. It is an architecture. And like all architecture, it can be built from consciously, or it can just happen to you. What comes next is the part that actually matters in terms of forward motion. What to do with the understanding that the interior life you've been building your whole life is not a liability. That it has weight, that weight creates pull. And pull, consciously directed, is not obsession as accident. It is presence as intention. Here is what I want to leave you with because I think it's the most important thing. You did not build your interior life in order to attract people. You built it because the interior life was where the real living happened. That is true, and it will continue to be true regardless of what anyone else does with it. But something shifts when you understand the mechanism. When you stop reading the pull you create as an error, as a misunderstanding, as something that will eventually be corrected when people figure out you're not as deep as they imagined. You are exactly as deep as they imagined. That is not the part that needed correcting. What may need attention is the armor, the preemptive withdrawal, the exits before the exposure, the way the self-sufficiency became, somewhere along the way, a system for not being found rather than a genuine state of not needing. The hanged man holds the key here, not as surrender, as voluntary suspension of the reflex, the choice to stop exiting before the thing can complete, to stay inside the moment of contact long enough to find out what it actually contained. After all this time with the tarot, what I know to be true is that the people who pull the High Priestess in reading after reading are being asked one specific question, not to open up more in the way other people mean when they say, open up, but to stop treating their own depth as something that requires apology, to stop over-explaining, over-qualifying, over-softening what they know and how they see and how they move through the world, to stop performing accessibility at the expense of the actual thing, which is the depth that creates in every room they enter the specific gravity that other people spend the rest of their evening trying to name. The World card, when it comes for someone like this, arrives not as a completion of some external journey. It arrives as the moment when the interior architecture and the exterior life finally stop being at war with each other. When the depth that was always there is no longer something being carried privately, but something being lived from, openly, specifically, without apology. What you built inside yourself, in all the quiet, in all the solitude that other people didn't understand, was not a retreat from life. It was preparation for living from a different place than most people ever reach. And you don't have to explain it to anyone. You just have to stop explaining it away. If you've never subscribed before and this is the video that made you want to, now is the time. Like it if it landed. I read every comment, and the things you leave there tell me over and over that this is exactly where you need to be.